talked about it. He even though we have these 2 repetition days, really the last week or so for him, and he's got the low end, freshman stuff, but he's the whole last week is pretty much, repetition for him, and he basically takes a subject matter in math that forces them, and there's a lot of word problems involved, but there's also it forces them to use everything they've done this whole semester, and that sort of serves as a platform for the students to realize, wow, we've actually learned a lot, and now we can solve these problems by putting together everything that we've learned, and they're difficult problems because there's so many steps, and that's an issue, and that's why part of the reason why he needs 5 or 6 typical days, but that's something he tries to do at the end of every semester, is come up with certain problems or certain material and activities that just brings everything together. So I just thought I'd share that in terms of, just because we have these 2 repetition days doesn't, the idea of repetition should be occurring throughout our classes all the time, really. You guys are talking about different U-review before every test and things like that. That's great. I think Kevin Reardon, he does Jeopardy games sometimes. He hasn't played Jeopardy, especially with geometry, with his definitions and stuff, with a lot of the geometry terms. So like anything in terms of games or problems or group work, as you mentioned, or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, having them do any kind of project sort of easily, you can sort of score easy points on, like a research thing or a presentation or something like that. And with what Mike Dirks taught me with cross country was interesting. He said, if some of the kids aren't motivated to do the running, I don't understand why someone wouldn't be motivated to run 7 miles and not get anywhere. But it's sometimes the case. But he said, sometimes you got to get them motivated, and a really good way to get them motivated is games. Like you could have it be objective. Like whoever gets closest to their goal time, not fastest but closest to your goal time, gets this or that. Or I have a lollipop for the person who I think is putting in the best effort today. Just little things like that really make a big difference, and that translates into the class. Like just making it, just giving it a little bit of an incentive. Because for some kids, it's like, I'll study all these terms, and I don't know. They could be studying, but just not have the motivation to do it. So.
I know for my freshmen, today I have them kind of write this sample paragraph. It'll pretty much be just like what the final will look like. And so I'll give them, 2 different questions that mirror, the 6 different options that they have in the final. And then that way they can see what it's like. And then on Tuesday they'll come back and we'll reflect on it. I'm not going to grade it, but I'll say, this is exactly what I'm looking for in the editing and revision checklist, what I've told you all year, to get them into this idea of anticipation and reflection. So they have to reflect on what they've done, how they can actually accomplish this, and how well they actually do it, to hopefully translate that into this idea of anticipation. I had a teacher in high school, he was my soccer coach too, and he said, technically this is just a big game. That you're trying to beat me as the teacher in a game. And once you understand the cycles and the patterns that I have as a teacher, then you're going to be more willing to beat me. And it's all about, once you translate it into a game for a lot of kids that are athletes, you have to be prepared to win, but you have to have that will to prepare to win, and that's what makes you great. And so if I can get them to reflect on actually getting into this point of getting themselves motivated, generating that will within themselves, and then they can prepare, and then I think they go on from there. And it's kind of taking what Mike said earlier in the year. I mean, these kids at a point now should know what they write, what the grade should be. And if they can't do that, they can at least trade it with a student and be like, well, this is what you should get based on the rubric guidelines. So I think that's where it's all at. I don't like the idea of repetition, because that's pretty much what we've been doing all year. I think this is a point now that it's getting into reflection on what you've done and how you can somehow apply. So for me, it's like reflection and application days, because repetition to me is just review. You should be doing that on your own, and I'll give you stuff, but I'm just going to kind of step away and these days are yours, and you can have that student success center in my class, and if you have a question, I'll answer it. But when we have review sessions, I don't stand up and I don't talk. I'll give it to you. You guys get in groups, and then I'll help facilitate a conversation, but I'm not giving you answers. You should know the answers on day 78 and 79 after being with me for 77 days.
It's interesting, the way you've defined the repetition to include the reflection component. Actually, I think that's how it's intended. As opposed to a repeated content over again, I think it is supposed to be that reflection. You know, and then you're right, you could argue it's a little bit of a misnomer to call it that repetition, because at least that's how I envision it too, and how it's been explained to me, as more a reflection on the terms, but also on yourself as a student, on what's going to happen in a couple days for finals. And so actually I think that reflection is accurate.
Because I think in Ignatian pedagogy, that's what we're looking for them to do. This reflection is a launching pad into lifelong learning.
Right. I think that's why I have such a hard time with it too. Like, I think with the games and things like that, you know, I teach chemistry and I teach juniors, and it's always just been kind of a struggle with me back and forth to say, okay, if I sit here and I give them the questions to the test, or I sit here and play games with them, what's that going to look like their freshman year of college when they go out and they want to be academic students? You know, I don't know about you, but in my college, I didn't have any professors who played review games with me, none, and gave me a review for the final. And so I kind of worry, it's kind of this teeter-totter back and forth as to, it is my responsibility not only to prepare them for this final, but also to prepare them for how they're going to study in the future, or what this is going to look like when they get out of here. Because we are preparing all students to go to college here. Right? That's Rockhurst is a college prep. So whatever that looks like for each individual kid, I don't know, I kind of worry with that and struggle with that as well.
But you know, we all have those little games that we play with ourselves. Like, I think, I don't know, when I look at girls versus boys, I think boys are a little more immature, and they take a little longer to kind of grasp that.
Very mature,
a
yeah.
couple girls here, I'm okay.
That's right, exactly right.
But they need a little more instruction and a little more explanation. Girls kind of walk into high school, I think a lot of them, I look at the girls over at St. Teresa's, they've got their planners, they're all organized, they get in groups to study. They find that fun component in education. So they're going to go, we're going to get a group together and we're going to study tonight. So they actually do study, but it's kind of fun because they're all together with their friends. And when you go home and study, you know, even in college, you might go down to the coffee shop to sit down and let's have a coffee and we'll talk and study together. We all find that fun component for ourselves, because studying for finals, even in college, isn't a whole lot of fun. So how do you do it? How do you keep yourself going? You know, how do you motivate yourself to get through it? How do you stay awake at night? So these kids are just a little younger. So you find something that matches or gets that energy and that excitement going at this point, so that as they get older and more mature, they can find more mature ways to deal with it. But, for me, I can't remember things unless I write it down. So I had to write everything down and organize it. Well, a lot of these boys are not going to sit and write everything down. But if you do the games, if you get that brain actively working, then they might go home and say, okay, we did Jeopardy. Okay, so here was the question. I'll write the question down. Now I have the answer. Oh, okay, that relates to something else, and that relates to something else. So you're actually teaching, and it doesn't have to be dry. It can be lots of fun. And you're still teaching them something. You're still teaching them college prep material. They're still getting ready, but why can't you have fun along the way? I mean, I guess when I look at the in-services, I just, when we come back to school, and if I have to think of someone up there talking for the whole day, it's like, oh, I hate this. But if we did an activity, it's kind of fun. And if I could learn the same thing by doing a fun activity, because we do some of those in March, like we go bowling, or, with the FDC, some of the fun activities. A lot of times I learn more about the faculty by doing that than by just sitting there and saying, all right, let's just look at, get some specific information from everybody. Here, we're going to give you a test on who are all the teachers and what subject do they teach and what do they do. Or you could do a fun activity where we could go, well, like last spring where we do those questions and ask, does anybody know who was on like a soap opera? All right, I will remember that was Burn, but it was a fun activity, and I'd rather learn that way than have someone get up and lecture to me. So I think even as adults we need that fun component to